Today with us, we have Nino Perrotta, who's a former Secret Service agent and the former special agent in charge of EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt's security detail. Thank you for coming with us today.
It's my pleasure.
All right, so Nino, you just resigned a couple days ago, on Monday, I think. Why did you resign?
So Michael, I retired April 30th,
yeah.
and that's perfectly fine. The media has incorrectly stated that I resigned. I had planned, in fact, it's in my book, Dual Mission, to retire July of 2017. But once I was given the opportunity by my management at EPA to run the security detail, I had decided to stay a bit longer, which ended April 30th of this year.
In that time, Scott Pruitt has come under a lot of fire for a lot of scandals, and most recently, a former Trump campaign official and former EPA official named Kevin Chmielewski has come out and accused him and talked to Democrats and given them a laundry list of accusations. And some of those accusations specify you. Why do you think he's coming out, and how much of what he says is true and how much is just misleading or false?
First of all, I testified yesterday in front of the Senate committee that was interested in understanding my role in these various allegations. I will tell you that I believe at the end of the day, these are disgruntled employees, staffers, who, for whatever reason, decided to air dirty laundry, false dirty laundry, to the press, and it received some traction. But as time will go forward and information is uncovered on the various allegations, people will realize that they were falsified and intentionally used to mislead the American people. I will tell you that in January, I had a conversation with Kevin telephonically while he was overseas. And in that conversation, that was ultimately memorialized in a report and handed to EPA for record, he made numerous threats, was very agitated, was venting to me about some issues he had with his pay. And I was attempting to assist him by telling him that this is an easy fix. You need to contact various folks in the agency, and they will then address those concerns. So it's nothing that you need to get upset about. And he continued. And he began to threaten the EPA, specifically the administrator and the chief of staff, that he was going to talk to the press and everyone he could about how, and he used a very interesting word describing how effed up the EPA was, and how effed up the administrator was, and how effed up the chief of staff was. And I found that to be very, very bizarre. Here's a person who is a political appointee under the Trump administration. If you have differences, it should be aired through your chain of command. At this time when he was making these allegations, he was the deputy chief of operations, deputy chief of staff of operations. So to call a law enforcement official of the agency and to make these threatening statements, I felt uncomfortable. I have to be honest with you. He called again the next day. And I repeated that, unfortunately, at this time, based on his tone and his allegations, that I had to report the information. So in January of 2018, it's important that the American people know this. This person, Kevin, and I had a difference, and a very serious difference. It takes us to another incident, which occurred the following month, where I'm asking for his placard that allowed him to park in the EPA facility and his credentials because of his position. And our director Henry Barnett, who's the head of the Office of Criminal Enforcement, Forensics, and Training, provided him these credentials. They were very specific on the use and when they can be handed to such a person and what their responsibilities were and were not. And we simply asked for those back. And when I asked for those back, I had another agent on the phone call with me. Because of that January call, I was very uncomfortable with Kevin's tone and behavior. We asked, how can we facilitate in securing those credentials? Kevin immediately elevated it, said he was going to call the White House, and puts on a White House staff person from EPA, who's signed to EPA, Charles Munoz. And later, after Charles hearing the same ranting and raving that I heard, admitted that he was glad to be on the call so that he can advise senior management, senior officials of the EPA of this person's behavior. Look, I was told what to do. You received something through the law enforcement channels of the agency. You are a senior official of the agency. We're trying to embrace you like we have embraced every other administration and officials. But at times things don't work out. It happens, and therefore you need to be respectful. He could not handle that. So there's a lot more to these allegations and why I believe they occurred. But I believe in principle it occurred because of that January call, where I, at that point, advised him that I was going to inform senior management officials, my career staff, managers, and the political of this call that was very, very disturbing.
In January, he told you that he had information that he was going to go to the press with and to damage the administration, all because of a pay snafu?
That is correct, sir.
And that's when a lot of the negative stories started coming out, specifically ones like a major one in the New York Times that targeted you and accused you of single-handedly entering a $30,000 security contract with a foreign security agency. Would you even be able to do that?
To answer the question, that is a false accusation. Don't know how or where that issue came up or how it was developed, but it is false. And to do something like that, a person at my level and grade in the agency would not have the authority to do so. You would have to have senior authority to do such a charge.
Another accusation that came out in the New York Times and others is that you were basically trying to steer contracts towards your business partners. And, I think, especially one about a security sweep that happened.
That's correct.
And so what exactly happened?
It's a misunderstanding, and it's interesting because Mr. Chmielewski was not involved during that process. I was a special agent, not the special agent in charge or the acting special agent in charge. So my boss, the acting special agent in charge, it's a long word to say, Eric Weiss, career officials, Reginald Allen, who was the deputy chief of staff at the time, these folks were informed, advised of a vendor that I knew, explained to them that this vendor was someone that's a subcontractor through my company, that was cleared through EPA many, many years prior. And the only reason that the vendor was selected, that is in the news, Mr. Steinmetz, is because there was issues within the agency in identifying a vendor, which to me was bizarre. I have to be honest with you.
So EPA didn't even have anyone to go to do a security sweep like this?
They didn't. There's communication about this that I do not want to get into because the investigation on the Hill has all this information. I'd like to keep that completely confidential. But this is all out in the open. It was explained. So it was clear to me now that certain people compared notes, shared information, and created this false narrative. And I believe the American people are going to see this eventually.
So basically the big narrative that's been going on is you're kind of like the mastermind behind the Pruitt security apparatus, which has been heavily criticized as being too big. He's overspent on agents, something like $3 million.
A couple of things that are important for you to know. Under this administration, the Protective Service Detail, which falls under the Office of Criminal Enforcement, Forensics, and Training, received new hires under an exemption rule. And the Criminal Investigative Division, CID, which is headed by Director Jessica Taylor, received a number of agents for their mission.
And that was to compensate them for having to pull extra shifts when the security was understaffed.
Well, the purpose of all this was to not use agents from the field to supplement the detail, which, sir, by the way, has occurred since my entire time being on the detail, which is approximately 14 years. The EPA Protective Service Detail was understaffed the entire time I was there.
So they were always pulling agents from the field.
They were always pulling agents from the field. So when you do a mathematical calculation, it should be a mathematical calculation of the use of the agents in the field supplementing the mission of the detail compared to what is currently being used. That has to happen to get a true cost comparison. The other is the detail, whenever they would tap the field, would remove agents working on very sensitive environmental crimes cases from doing their core mission. So the concept of hiring agents for the detail, which was done before I came on board by Special Agent Eric Weiss, by Director Henry Barnett, and Deputy Director Pamela Mazakis, was the correct mode, because you don't want to take agents from the field to supplement a protective mission. Okay? When I inherited the detail, 24/7 was moving forward, the detail was being supplemented, and I was asked to look at a proposal for 30 agents to be permanently hired for the detail. I was given this from my director, Barnett, and Deputy Director Pam Mazakis. And I came back with a proposal after seeking counsel from other agencies and how they do business, including my old agency, the Secret Service. And I came up with a number of 19 agents, 19 working agents, including the supervisors. And that was put forward, and senior management ultimately approved it.
So you actually wanted fewer agents than EPA original career officials wanted to give you. They wanted to hire about twice as many people as you did.
That is correct, sir.
You're kind of posed as the person who wanted to vastly expand the security detail, and yet here you are cutting it.
Completely false narrative. What's important for you to know is that soon after the administrator was mentioned as potentially the new administrator, things began to become of interest to the Office of the Inspector General. They began to share information with us. Cases were then opened against various threats. So there was an immediate spike very soon after confirmation, and in particular between February, March, April, and May. June timeframe was a very heavily interest in the administrator was seen.
In investigations.
Investigations, threat investigations, direct threats, indirect threats, unusual interest. All of that encompasses what we determine as viable information on how we operate. But the decision of 24/7 was made at a time where Agent Weiss, who was the acting special agent in charge, and Director Barnett, Deputy Director Mazakis were in charge, and therefore they need to be asked what brought security from portal to 24/7.
And portal to portal refers to, in the morning when they go to work to when they drop them off at home.
And it can be very, very early in the morning and very, very late at night. depending on the schedule and depending on what the administrator is planning to do.
So in many cases, 24/7 is you're really just adding a few more hours to the shift.
Yes, and definitely work on the weekends, even though a lot of the administrators had responsibilities that we needed to support. The weekends, correct.
What sorts of things did you witness when you were guarding him, and did you consider them security threats?
I supported the shift, and when I supported the shift, there were instances that were very disturbing to me. I remember an incident where some very graphic language was used and left on voice messages on the family's phones, daughter, wife, to me that were very, very disturbing. Those particular examples, you don't need many of them to realize that there are people out there that want to cause harm. And what's important for everyone to know is that security is not there to prevent from an incident to occur. Security is there to plan ahead, hoping that they can diffuse, deflate, or address potential issues. The last step is when someone's going to do something physically and you have to stop them. So when you have these indicators out there, these negative indicators where there's messages, there's threats being sent via LinkedIn or, excuse me, via Facebook or packages, where you have people putting things in the building, mocking the administrator, from that to the point where you have a foreign national who is saying that he's going to find the administrator and he's going to kill him, I think that's enough to understand that we have an issue here. And the administrator, I believe, has trust and confidence that the detail, comprised of former Secret Service, EPA agents, State Department, Pentagon, DOD agents, I think he has enough confidence that collectively he has an unbelievable team. In fact, the detail is comprised of some of the most highly trained agents that I've ever seen.
I want to go back to another allegation against you that was raised, and that there was somehow collusion between you and the I think he's the Assistant Inspector General, or the Deputy Inspector General, Patrick Sullivan, that you guys were buddy-buddy, and that was somehow a conflict of interest giving the Inspector General's investigations into Scott Pruitt.
Well, Pat Sullivan and I did not know each other when he was with the Secret Service. He's an older vintage, and I met Pat in 2011 briefly, and we have a business, cordial, professional relationship through the agency because of my role coordinating for the detail any intelligence information. So I don't know why this allegation came through, but I am going to say that so that you are, and the viewers can understand, I don't drink beer. I hate beer.
And so the allegation, just to refresh people's minds, is that you had drinks, you were seen having drinks at a bar near EPA with Patrick Sullivan, but that's hard because you were drinking beer, but you don't drink beer.
I don't drink beer, and it was a meeting set up for Kevin by Pat officially through EPA email. Director Barnett was invited. He recently has confirmed that I was not at that meeting. Special Agent James Caldwell, who was retired and who can attest that I was not at that meeting, and another gentleman from the Department of Interior. That was the whole intent of this meeting, to help Kevin, who was assisting the agency in one of his duties, to resolve some pending issues with the Office of Homeland Security. There was a lot of issues going back and forth, and Kevin was getting involved in that, and therefore Mr. Sullivan had set up an appointment for him to meet someone who does this in another agency, the Office of Homeland, so that Kevin can get another view of things. It was a very good idea, I believe, and I was invited, but because I was traveling the next day with the administrator, I had decided that to get home to my family, so I didn't attend. I would have attended if I had time, but I did not attend.
But no beer.
And no beer. But the problem with this is, it was the intent is very clear on what the person wanted to do, what Kevin wanted to do. He wanted to show that there was some sort of collusion between myself and the Office of the Inspector General, which is bizarre. Using me as an example is probably going to help the listeners understand that these people just wanted to create a false narrative. And again, like I said, as things move forward, we're going to identify these deficiencies in these allegations. I mean, I think that this is important. We need to get to the bottom of it, and I'm hoping that that is the case.
You spent a lot of time around Scott Pruitt. What's your impression of him? Was he a good boss to work for?
All the administrators are fantastic. They're unbelievable people. They're unique in their own way. We keep a very cordial, professional approach towards the administrators, and I can tell you that I've been honored to serve each and every one of them, to include Administrator Scott Pruitt.
Yeah. And you're talking about even Obama administration.
Oh yeah, I served.
You got along great with them too.
Every one of them is unique. Every one of them, amazing people in their own way, and I can see why they became administrators.
Do you have a favorite?
No comment.
So that's all we have today. Thank you, Nino Perrotta,
Sure.
for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Boom.